about.
The content of this program represents the opinions, research, and observation of the host and his assessment of scientific evidence available at this time. None of the statements, claims, techniques, dietary guidelines, or supplements mentioned in this program have been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. The information contained herein is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for standard care provided by medical practitioners. Any application of the advice presented here is at the listener's own discretion or risk. The information should not be used for self-diagnosis or application. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before beginning any new nutritional, exercise, or lifestyle improvement program. The host and this station disclaim any responsibility for any adverse effects arising from the use or application of information contained in this program. Now broadcasting from his nutritional command center deep in the heart of Victoria, Texas, charging through the swamp of misconceptions, deception, and myths, bringing to you the newest cutting-edge scientific-based nutrition information so you can enjoy whole spectrum health. Here's the paladin of nutrition and whole foods expert, Labron Allen.
Good morning. This is Labron Allen, your host with Health Alert. Well, it's Saturday once again. It rolls around fairly quickly, doesn't it? Except when we're at work in the middle of the week. Then it seems like it takes absolutely forever for that Saturday morning to come around. But here we are once again. So as typical, we have a lot of health news to go over. Some of it is rather disturbing, and the rest of it is going to be quite interesting. The first one is out of Science Daily. That actually is a very good source of health news. They have fairly frequent studies that are published that can be quite insightful as far as things that are going to be beneficial through a natural health aspect or standpoint. Now, this one is a new study out of UCLA. It is a rat study. I always wonder why we spend so much time studying rats. Seems like we should spend time studying good people, not the rats in society. No, just joking. Once again, this is a rat study. And what this is a look at how a specific substance that appears in so many food products, and really notice that I use the word product because that's exactly what the average merchandise that you go into a grocery store and purchase is, especially if you are going down any of the center aisles and not just shopping along the perimeter of the building. Did you realize that the majority of the things that we should consume that are actually healthful, that actually benefit the body, are not in the aisles of a typical grocery store? They are in the perimeter of the building. That is where you're going to find your vegetable products, your fresh produce, your fruit products, your fruit produce. It's where you're going to find your meats, your dairy products, whether that be cow or goat. So if you spend most of your time when you go to the store just shopping along the perimeter of the building, I guarantee to you that you and your family is going to end up much healthier. So just keep that in mind. So what is this particular substance that appears in all of these products that I'm referring to? Well, in this study, they were looking at how high fructose affects the brain. So here's what they did. And by the way, this study appeared, it was just recently published as of the 15th of this month, in the Journal of Physiology. A neurosurgeon, a professor of neurosurgery, had this to say about the study. He said that our findings illustrate that what you eat affects how you think. Now let me repeat that. His words were that this study proved that what you eat affects how you think. Do you realize how powerful food is on your body? Well, if you didn't before, that should be a clue. He goes on to say, the study found that eating a high fructose diet over the long term, okay? So it doesn't mean that if you eat something with high fructose in it once every 15 years that this is going to affect your brain. It's if you do it repeatedly, once a week, twice a week, every day, 3 times a day, which is what most people do. Just look into different things. You'll be amazed of how much high fructose corn syrup is in everything, including condiments. Do you use ketchup? There's high fructose corn syrup in it. There will be many things that contain this substance that will surprise you. So just keep that in mind. Continuing. Specifically, what the high fructose corn syrup seems to do, a high fructose diet seems to do, is it alters our brain's ability to both learn and remember information. So think about this. If you have school-aged children or children that are not even in school yet, do you think that as a good parent, it might be something to look at the amount of high fructose that is in their diet? Because it will affect how they are able to think, how they are able to learn and remember information. And you can safely assume that especially in a developing brain, will this substance greatly affect them. Now, you parents who, for whatever reason, are giving your children, your infants, infant formula, I challenge you to immediately go to that product, take a look at the ingredients, and read what the first or possibly second ingredient or substance within that infant formula is. It is high fructose corn syrup. In fact, it's usually about 42% of that infant formula is high fructose corn syrup. Now, with this study and the information that it gives us, do you think that that infant formula, with 42% of it being a high fructose product, is going to decrease the intelligence of your baby? The answer is yes. So please, do your children a favor and do not give them substances that are going to harm their brains. So let's look at this study a little bit closer. One of the other things that they found in this UCLA rat study was that adding an omega-3 fatty acid, DHA, greatly enhanced memory and learning. DHA actually helps the synaptic function of the brain, which is your brain cells, your neurons' ability to transmit signals from one brain cell to the other. So the DHA omega-3 fatty acid particularly helped that. That is specifically the mechanism that the brain needs in order to make our learning and our memory possible. Now, our bodies only produce a certain amount of DHA, so it needs to be supplemented in our diet. We either through fish, certain nuts contain high amounts of omega-3s, avocados contain omega-3s, and then of course you can supplement with high-quality omega-3s. Now, the way that this study was constructed was that the rats were fed standard rat chow, and then they were trained on a maze twice daily for 5 days before they started this experimental diet with either the high fructose or the DHA. Okay, so one group of rats was going to be fed the rat chow with high fructose. The other group of rats was going to be fed the rat chow with DHA, no fructose added. So after 6 weeks, these researchers again tested the rat's ability to recall the route through the maze and escape the maze as rapidly as possible. What do you think they saw? Well, the second group of rats, the one that they fed the rat chow and the DHA, those rats just navigated through that phase much more rapidly than the rats that did not receive the omega-3 fatty acids. The rats that were deprived of those omega-3s were very much slower, and even their brains showed a decline in that synaptic activity, that transmission of information between one neuron, one brain cell, and the other. So these rats that were given the high fructose, they couldn't even remember their way through the maze. I mean, that is very scary. If we are ever thinking to ourselves, my goodness, how can so many people seem like they just are, forgive me for the word, but just stupid. They just don't seem to, their brains seem to not work sometimes. If you ever found yourself thinking that, that is probably quite accurate, and I think we have a very good reason as to why that is the case. So if you care about your brain and about the long-term effects of what this substance can do, I would highly suggest that you do not touch this stuff. There's another word for substances like this. The word is poison. Poison. When you start truly realizing that these substances are poisons to the body, then that will help you to completely avoid them. There is no reason to, once every 10 or 15 years, have a hot chocolate sundae with corn syrup in it. There are ways of having things like that that are not only safer, but might actually carry some benefit to the body. There are ways of doing that. You simply have to find them because they are not easily available. It requires doing things on your own. Now, one of the other things about this study is that the rats that did not have the DHA, this omega-3 fatty acid, so the one with high fructose corn syrup, they also seem to have developed insulin resistance. Now, of course, insulin, we know it controls blood sugar that is in the blood, the glucose, rather, that is in the blood, and its ability of that glucose to get into our cells. That's specifically what insulin does. Also, insulin has been found to regulate synaptic function as well in the brain. So that means if your brain cells start becoming resistant to insulin, then that hormone is no longer capable of regulating that synaptic function either. So, you're beginning to really have a serious problem with brain cognition. Now, insulin actually has the capacity to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. And the insulin can actually signal neurons to trigger reactions that can disrupt learning and cause memory loss. So, one of the things about high fructose, especially high fructose corn syrup, is that it forces the body to secrete a significant amount of this insulin. And when you look at how much corn syrup the average American consumes in a year, do you know how much that is, by the way? It's an interesting statistic. The average American, according to the USDA, consumes 40 pounds. 40 pounds a year of high fructose products. 40 pounds. That is an unbelievable amount. Can you imagine what that's doing to the brains of the average American? So the next time you wonder about a person's capacity to drive, I don't think you're wrong. It could be definitely the high fructose at work. Now, you know that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is designed to safeguard the consumer of foods, of pharmaceuticals, of nutritional products, supplements. And there are many people who actually trust the agency to do just that. Some of those people who are trusting may not even think about if they should place that trust within the agency or not. Well, what am I getting at? Well, there's a very interesting statistic right on the FDA's website. In fact, I will give it to you so that you can look it up. It is www.fda.gov/drugs/development approval process/development resources/drug interactions. Now, you probably aren't going to get all that, but if you go to our Health Alert Facebook page, you will actually see the links to this, okay? So you don't really have to remember that. Of course, if you're drinking coffee, take a look at your coffee mate. Why? Because it has high fructose product in it. So if you're having problems remembering what I just said, you might not want to use Coffee Mate. There are other much better things that even help the taste of coffee as well. And Coffee Mate, or a creamer, quote unquote, is not one of them. Anyway, when you go to this web page, at the top it says, why learn about adverse drug reactions, or ADRs? And it lists 3 sources of the information that they give in bulleted points below. Some of the sources are the Institute of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and the American Journal of Medicine. So those are the sources for the statistics that they list. Now, what is one of the stats? And this is why I bring this subject up. Well, the second, let's see, there are actually 5 bulleted points. The second bulleted point is that adverse drug reactions kill 100,000 Americans every single year. 100,000 every year. These people die due to adverse drug reactions of, and here's the point, think about what this is saying. They are dying of adverse drug reactions from approved, FDA-approved medications, correctly prescribed. Now, that is incredible. This is from an agency that is supposed to be safeguarding the consumer of these products. And yet, approved medications are killing 100,000 people a year. Now, statistically, what are the leading causes of death that we hear about all the time in the United States? The first one is heart disease. The second one is cancer. The third one, diabetes. Now, looking at the statistics, of those 3 statistics, you would actually have to put adverse drug reactions as being the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. The 3rd leading cause of death in the United States is from adverse drug reactions of approved, correctly prescribed medication. And this statistic is from their own medical journals. And do they take responsibility for these deaths? Not at all. Not a bit. So if you have placed your trust in that agency to safeguard you, and that just because something is FDA approved, you think that it must be safe, I would caution you to think a little bit differently. So the previous study that I went over about the high fructose products and the rat study, that was actually a very well study. It was a controlled study, and it was published in a peer-reviewed journal. Now, the next, actually, this is not even a study, the next analysis that I'm going to go over, I am going over it for a specific reason, and this is an example of a very badly constructed study. Now, the reason I'm doing this is that many times the studies that we hear in the media are actually totally insignificant because they are so badly constructed that the summary of the study, if you want to call it that, if it's not a meta-analysis, which is just an analysis of many different studies, is just completely, basically a biased agenda, because there are so many other factors that are not even considered when they publish their particular summary of that analysis. So this one is from the Annals of Neurology. It is a paper that was published, when was it? Actually, May the 22nd, so very recently. And it says that this is a paper from a team of scientists that analyzed data. Analyzed data. That is not a study. All right, that's just an analysis of data. Now, if you go into an analysis of data with a particular idea of what you might find, do you think that you are more likely to find that? Well, obviously, the answer is yes. So this, again, was from the team of scientists that analyzed dietary data from 6,000 women over the age of 65. It was also over a 4-year monitoring period. And what they looked at is women who consumed more saturated fat. And I'm going to give you some information about that aspect here in just a minute. But this is from women who consume more quote-unquote saturated fat. They were, through this analysis, found to score worse on cognitive function tests than those who ate less of the saturated fat. Okay, now, here's something that is very, very important. When you hear any study, even if it's a truly legitimate study, which this is not, this is completely an analysis of information. When you hear any study that is about quote-unquote saturated fat, make sure that you identify exactly what fats it is that they are using in those studies. Why? Well, because you will very often find that the fat that they're actually studying is not saturated. And in fact, it is a trans fat. Now, trans fats are very dangerous, very deadly. You should not consume them. I mean, there's really enough information out there that there's no question. But they will use the word saturated fat and trans fats interchangeably. Okay? So just because you hear saturated fat does not mean it is animal fats. Usually, I would say a good 95% of the time, if not more, it is actually a trans fat. So that's very important to know. Now, we would have to look over this analysis very closely in order to know what kind of fats they were actually studying. Now, just because the Atlantic paper says animal products, it doesn't really mean that that's what they studied at all, okay? So what makes this really not a very legitimate analysis as well? Well, for example, they are saying that these women over the age of 65 that ate quote-unquote saturated fats had cognitive decline over ones who did not. Okay, but what other things did these women do as well? Did these women tend to exercise less? Did, these women smoke? What other kind of lifestyle things were they doing that these other women who supposedly didn't eat saturated fats did not do? And that in itself really makes this analysis completely moot. It just doesn't have any merit whatsoever. So the reason that I'm going over this is to show you and to help you understand that when you hear about studies of various things, really be skeptical about all the aspects of the study until you find out for yourself what they are looking at. Do be aware that most studies are not unbiased. Most studies, they have an agenda for whatever reason, and most likely they are going to find the results of that study correlate very closely with their agenda. So be aware. Now, on this show, we have talked quite a bit about genetically modified organisms. Regardless if it is fish or if it is produce, we have talked about it quite a bit. Now, you might find it interesting that at Disney World, now this is supposed to be a family amusement park where you go for the fantasy vacation with your children, and it's a lifetime of memories and all these wonderful things that we hear in the advertisements about Disney World. Well, you might find it interesting that at Disney World, they are apparently in bed with Monsanto. Why do I say that? Well, because at Disney World, they have a exhibit that is called Living with the Land. Wow, that sounds really back to earth, doesn't it? Back to the basics of humankind. Living with the land. That sounds like something we want to do. Well, this exhibit actually is teaching children about GMO, genetically modified organism agriculture, is just a really fun activity for the entire family. So these unstudied genetically modified organisms that are being found to, for example, genetically modified corn is being found to create renal failure in rat studies. So that's good for you. That's obviously great family fun to have renal failure from your corn chips. So this is an exhibit at the Walt Disney World's Epcot Center. They are featuring specifically in this exhibit genetically modified fruits and vegetable, which, hey, this is cool. Some of them are shaped like Mickey Mouse's head. Oh, that is fun. So as we eat these genetically modified organisms and have renal or kidney failure, at least we can really have great fun because it's a Mickey Mouse head. That's cute. Now, according to several different reports, the agricultural exhibit called Living with the Land takes parents and their young children on a tour through living laboratories. Living laboratories. Yeah, that's really living with the land. That's where our God-produced and created food comes from, is in a laboratory. Is that a hypocritical title for the exhibit or what? Incredible. Anyway, continue on. This living laboratory tour highlights the wondrous ways that scientists are helping farmers prepare for the food needs of our world's nations. Yeah, that's what it's doing. That's why in these third world countries that Monsanto is forcing these indigenous peoples to purchase their own seeds from Monsanto. And they are only good for 1 year's harvest. They can't save the seeds over. No, they have two choices after that first harvest. They can either purchase more seed, of which, these peoples in third world countries have so much financial funds to do so. It's not like their life depends on this food or not. Or the second choice is that they can purchase a chemical from Monsanto that activates these seeds for a second harvest. Well, that's living with the land, isn't it? That certainly doesn't have anything to do with corporate profiteering. Not whatsoever. I don't know how I could possibly think that. Now, this is actually a gigantic exhibit, okay? There are over 2.5 million square feet of the greenhouse space, the Living with the Land exhibit. It is basically just an exhibit of agricultural technology. Do you understand what this would do with children if the parents didn't give them any more information? They would actually start thinking that food doesn't come growing out of the soil, but it's actually created in a laboratory. So as they became adults, they would have this subconscious conditioning and programming to think that GMO is not only okay, but it's wonderful. It's living with the land. Isn't this how it always was? It's just like how many pediatricians are discouraging mothers from nursing. It seems to be horrible and bad, and your child isn't flourishing, and if you don't put them in infant formula that has 42% high fructose syrup and destroys their brain, immediately we're going to call CPS on you. Now, you see what this will do in subsequent generations if this continues is that eventually there's going to be a child that goes to their father or their mother and say, "Mommy, I heard that babies used to nurse from their mommies. Is that true?" And that mother, being well-conditioned, says, "That's a conspiracy theory. That never happened. You get food from infant. That's what infants get food from. Food from their mothers? Nursing? That's ridiculous." That is definitely the direction that the world is headed. So this was some pretty interesting health news. I hope that you found some information that will safeguard your health now and in the future. Remember that you can always contact us. First way is through email. That email is radiocomments@healthimprovementprograms.com. Also, you can like us on our Facebook page. We have 2 of them. We have one for our clinic. You can find that at www.facebook.com/natural.health.clinic. Or for the Health Alert Show Facebook page, it is www.facebook.com/health-alert-show. Also remember that we have free health presentations scheduled twice a month. They are held at our clinic. If you would like to RSVP for any of those free health presentations, all you have to do is call our front desk, and the front desk personnel, her name is Tanya, and the number is 361-575-4683. Again, that number is 361-575-4683. Also, if you wish to have your personal copy of any of the DVDs of these free health presentations, again, just call up Tanya at 361-575-4683, and she will send you that DVD free of charge. All you have to do is pay for the postage. Also, you can get all of our presentations on our YouTube channel, which is NutriDoc35. NutriDoc35. You can subscribe to that channel for free, and as we upload new episodes of the Health Alert Show or any of our free health presentation videos, you will be notified and can watch those videos. So until next week, stay healthy. This is Labron Allen, your host with Health Alert.